Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? The room hummed with low conversation, the kind that hides laughter behind coffee cups and confidence behind smirks. 13 men sat in a line, the best snipers the U.S. military could produce. Each had seen war up close, each carried the calm arrogance of experience. But right now, every one of them was failing. Outside, the Arizona desert shimmered under the weight of heat. Mirage ripples bent the air, twisting the mountains into illusion. The 4,000-meter target stood invisible to the naked eye, a white dot swallowed by distance. General William Hawkins removed his sunglasses. 30 years of combat had carved deep lines into his face, but his eyes were sharp, the kind that missed nothing. He turned to the group, his voice cutting through the desert silence. "Anyone else want to try?" It wasn't a question. It was a challenge, the kind that dared pride to answer. But no one moved. The men shifted in the heat, staring at their boots, at the horizon, at anything except the impossible task before them. The 4,000-meter shot wasn't just hard. It was nearly mythic. The record stood untouched, a boundary between human precision and the impossible. The silence stretched, then a voice, soft, clear, female. "I would like to try, sir." Heads turned. A woman stepped forward from the logistics tent. 32 years old, average height, brown hair tied in a regulation bun. No medals, no elite patch, just the plain insignia of a supply officer. Captain Alexis Reed. For a moment there was disbelief, then laughter. Captain Maxwell, the decorated former Navy SEAL, leaned back in his chair, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "The coffee lady wants to show us how it's done." A ripple of chuckles moved through the group. Alexis didn't flinch. She walked past them, boots steady on the earth. Her face calm, her steps efficient, almost quiet enough to make the laughter fade by contrast. Her eyes flicked once to the horizon, reading the wind, the shimmer, the color shift in heat. To anyone watching closely, it wasn't just a glance. It was a calculation. General Hawkins studied her. He'd seen bravado before, but this wasn't it. Something about her steadiness made him pause. "Captain Reed," he said, tone measured, "you understand this is a 4,000-meter shot, variable winds, mirage distortion. The best of them haven't come close." "Yes, sir," she said simply, "I understand." Her calm unnerved even him. "One shot," he said after a pause. "Make it count." As she moved toward the firing position, whispers rose behind her, some mocking, others curious. Smirk never left his face. "This should be entertaining," he muttered. But Alexis heard none of it. She knelt beside the rifle on the table, a weapon unfamiliar to her hands. Not the one she trained with, not the one she'd cleaned every morning in silence. But she adjusted it anyway, movements fluid, practiced. The kind of muscle memory that doesn't belong to logistics officers. Colonel James Blackwood, watching from a distance, noticed it too. He had seen her before, early mornings at the base, through the narrow window of her barracks. A woman who woke before dawn, brewed coffee in silence, and stripped down a rifle with precision that only years of combat could teach. He had recognized it instantly. The discipline of a predator. That morning, as she had done every day, Alexis Reed woke at 500 hours. No alarm, no hesitation. She swung her legs from the cot, the barracks still dark around her. Outside, the desert was just beginning to glow, that thin, cold hour before heat devoured everything. Her movements were silent, practiced, push-ups, sit-ups, stretching that pulled at scars no one ever asked about. Her mind clear, her body obeying rhythm without thought. From beneath her bunk she slid out a long metal case. The hinges creaked, familiar, comforting. Inside, a rifle that no longer existed in any official record, an M210 sniper platform decommissioned years ago. She wasn't supposed to have it. She cleaned it every morning anyway, piece by piece. It was a ritual, not nostalgia. Her hands moved automatically, checking pins, springs, optics. 4 minutes start to finish. Her fingers knew every contour the way some people know prayer beads. The coffee pot hissed quietly behind her. Black, no sugar, no cream, just heat and clarity. When she finished, she set the rifle on her bed, sunlight spilling through the blinds and catching the dull sheen of steel. For a moment she just looked at it, the past made visible in morning light. Then she turned away. By 600, she was walking toward the logistics office. The rest of the base barely noticed her. To most, she was just the quiet captain who signed off on ammo shipments and ran the supply depot with unnerving efficiency. The one who never talked much. The one who kept to herself. They called her Coffee Lady. They didn't know her hands once steadied a rifle under enemy fire. At the ammunition depot, a group of young soldiers jogged past, laughing. "Hey, Captain Reed," one called. "Got any to go with that coffee today?" Another added, "You can stock my ammo anytime." The others laughed. Alexis didn't respond, she just kept walking, boots crunching gravel, eyes forward. But those eyes, had anyone looked closely, were everything. The limp in the second man's stride, the wind shift from the flag at the yard's corner, the echo of distant practice shots from the range, the delay telling her distance, direction, temperature. Her mind did the math automatically. Old habits hard to unlearn. When a recruit dropped a crate of mixed rounds nearby, bullets spilling across the concrete, she crouched without hesitation. Her hands sorted them in seconds by caliber, by manufacturer, by weight. The recruit gaped. "How did you do that so fast?" "Physics," she said simply, standing. He blinked, confused. From the doorway, Staff Sergeant Martinez watched, brow furrowing. The old weapons specialist had seen talent before, but this was something else. You don't sort ammunition that precisely unless you've lived by it. Later, he approached her quietly. "I never thought I'd see Shadow 1 counting bullets." Alexis froze. For the briefest moment, her breath caught. "I don't know what you're talking about, Sergeant." Martinez stepped closer, voice low. "Afghanistan, 2011, Operation Desert Phantom. You were the ghost sniper, weren't you?" She looked at him evenly. No confirmation, no denial. "That person doesn't exist anymore," she said. Martinez nodded slowly. "Maybe, but the soldiers you saved in Kandahar, they still do. Some have kids now, families, because of you." When he left, Alexis stood alone among the shelves. The smell of oil, brass, and gunmetal surrounded her, old ghosts she thought she'd buried. But ghosts have a way of returning. Her mind drifted back, the sand, the heat, the hours lying motionless under a suit, heart sinking with the breath of desert wind. The radio static, the silence before the shot, the last voice of her commanding officer, Jake, breaking through the noise. "We're compromised." And then nothing but chaos. She blinked the memory away, but it lingered like the afterimage of a flash. Colonel Blackwood and Sergeant Martinez sat across from each other in the mess that afternoon, both nursing cups of bitter coffee. "You're sure it's her?" Blackwood asked. "Positive," Martinez said. "The way she handled those rounds, the control, you don't learn that in supply school." Blackwood nodded slowly. "I knew I recognized that precision. Desert Phantom Unit, Kabul 2014, bad intel, 4 dead." "She was the only one left," Martinez said quietly. Blackwood stared at his reflection in the coffee. "And now she counts bullets." Martinez sighed. "Some wounds don't heal, Colonel, especially the ones no one sees." Later that evening, Blackwood found her sitting alone in the corner of the mess hall, quietly eating. He sat across from her without invitation. "Mind if I join you, Captain?" Alexis looked up. "Of course not, sir." He studied her a moment, his tone deceptively casual. "Logistics must feel like a change of pace. I imagine combat work doesn't prepare you for supply paperwork." "It's necessary work," she said. Someone has to make sure the bullets go where they're needed. He smiled faintly. True enough, though I've found that some people never quite leave their old battlefields behind. She met his eyes. With respect, sir, some battlefields follow you whether you leave or not. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Blackwood leaned forward slightly. I trained Lieutenant Jake, good man, said he had a sniper who could thread a needle at a mile, said she made the impossible seem routine. Alexis's fork paused halfway to her mouth. He continued softly. He died in Kabul. I attended his memorial. Her voice was steady when she spoke. He exaggerated, sir. He was good at that. Maybe, Blackwood said, but his report didn't exaggerate. 3 confirmed rescues under your overwatch. You kept them alive. Alexis looked down. Some skills are better left unused. Blackwood nodded slowly. Maybe, but some skills find their own way back. Before she could respond, the mess hall intercom crackled. All personnel involved in the 4,000-meter challenge, report to briefing room 2. Blackwood stood. Think about it, Captain, he said quietly. Sometimes the things we run from are the very things that still need us. He left her there, staring at her untouched tray, the echoes of Kabul growing louder in her mind. That night she couldn't sleep. She sat at her desk, laptop glowing in the darkness. Satellite images of the Arizona range filled the screen. Wind patterns, air density, temperature gradients. She began to calculate trajectories, drop rates, drift. Her fingers moved automatically, numbers flowing like a language she had once spoken fluently. The math calmed her. At 2300 hours, a knock at her door broke the silence. Sergeant Martinez stood there, holding a small wooden box. I thought you might be preparing, he said. Brought you something that might help. She frowned. I never said I was participating. You didn't have to. He opened the box. Inside, a single bullet hand-loaded, polished to mirror finish. .338 Magnum, he said softly. Perfect weight balance. The kind that flies straight when everything else wants to knock it off course. She looked at it but didn't touch it. Why are you doing this, Sergeant? Because I've seen men like, he said, and I've seen what happens when people like him go unchallenged. Some men believe they're untouchable. They need reminding. She didn't answer. He closed the box and pushed it toward her. You don't have to take the shot, but if you do, make it count. When he left, the room felt smaller somehow, the weight of choice heavy in the air. Alexis stared at the bullet, the light catching its edges, her reflection curved in its brass surface. She whispered to no one, what if it wasn't just bad intel? The thought chilled her and woke something she thought she'd buried. She closed the laptop slowly. The desert wind hissed outside her window. Tomorrow, she knew, everything could change. Why did the air feel heavier that morning? The sun hadn't yet cleared the mountains, but the desert was already breathing heat. A copper light spilled across the range, making the horizon shimmer. Technicians moved like ghosts in the rising haze, checking wind sensors, calibrating optics, murmuring to each other in clipped voices. The 4,000-meter target sat far out there, so distant it looked unreal, a speck that could have been a trick of light. Captain Alexis Reed stood at her barracks window, coffee cooling untouched in her hand. She had slept little, not because of fear, but because the decision had already been made somewhere deep inside her. The bullet Sergeant Martinez had given her rested on her desk, catching the sunrise in its brass curve. Outside, trucks rumbled toward the test field. The sound vibrated faintly through the glass, familiar, rhythmic, like heartbeats before combat. She whispered under her breath, one shot. Not as a boast, as a vow. The testing range was alive when she arrived. Soldiers clustered near the observation tents. Officers in crisp uniforms compared notes. Pentagon observers stood under umbrellas, muttering about crosswinds and funding reports. General Hawkins moved among them like a storm contained in flesh, his expression flat, his presence electric. He called out, voice carrying effortlessly over the desert hum. What we attempt today isn't about records. It's about reaching the edge of what human precision can do. The crowd stilled. One by one, the 13 chosen snipers took their places. Men with medals and reputations, men whose confidence was worn like armor. Each approached the firing line with solemn routine, checking instruments, reading wind, entering values into ballistic computers. The first shooter's rifle cracked through the heat. 4 seconds of silence followed, then the spotter's quiet verdict: miss left 6 meters. The second shooter tried, then the third. Each shot carried 4 seconds of hope, followed by the same quiet failure. By the time the 12th man missed, the air around the spectators was thick with unease. Even arrogance was beginning to wilt under the sun. Captain Maxwell was last. He took his time, methodical, assured, every movement an exhibition of confidence. He adjusted the cheek rest, checked his laser anemometer, rechecked. Through his scope, he watched the mirage dance, murmuring corrections to his spotter like a man dictating prophecy. When he finally fired, the entire range held its breath. 4 long seconds. Miss, the spotter said, right 2 meters. Exhaled through clenched teeth. He stood, forcing a polite nod toward Hawkins, but the muscle twitch along his jaw betrayed him. The general scanned the line of shooters. It seems 4,000 meters remains out of reach. Silence followed, part disappointment, part relief. No one had succeeded, which meant no one had failed alone. Then, from the back of the crowd, "I would like to try, sir." The words cut through the heat like a clean blade. Heads turned. Alexis Reed stepped forward. Standard-issue uniform, no spotter, no custom gear, just the same quiet presence that had unsettled them days earlier. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then the whispers began. "She's not even combat qualified anymore." "Logistics officer." "She's joking, right?" His laugh was loudest. "With respect, General, this is wasting everyone's time." General Hawkins turned his gaze on him, a look that ended most arguments. Then he faced Alexis. "Captain Reed," he said, the words carrying equal weight of curiosity and caution, "you understand the conditions?" "Yes, sir." "Variable winds, heavy mirage, full distance." "Yes, sir." "1 shot." She nodded once. "That's all I'll need." The crowd parted as she approached the line. Colonel Blackwood watched her pass. He'd seen countless shooters prepare, but none moved with such controlled calm. There was no hesitation in her rhythm, no performance in her breathing. It was as if she were stepping back into something she'd never truly left. Crossed his arms, muttering to no one in particular, "This'll be good." Alexis knelt beside the rifle laid out for the challenge, an intervention, the most advanced long-range platform the Army possessed. She studied it for a moment, feeling its unfamiliar weight. Then she began making small adjustments, the way pianists touch keys before a song. Her fingers brushed the scope ring, feeling its tightness, the faint grit in the action. Everything registered, every sound, every vibration. She pulled a small leather notebook from her pocket, pages worn, filled with looping calculations written by hand. The murmurs behind her grew louder. Stepped closer, frowning. "Those aren't standard ballistic tables." She ignored him. He turned toward Hawkins. "Sir, that violates protocol." Colonel Blackwood's voice interrupted smoothly. "The challenge measures accuracy, Captain, not arithmetic." His mouth closed, his glare returning to Alexis. She turned one page, checked a number, and then reached into her pocket for the single round Martinez had given her. The sunlight glinted off the casing, a perfect arc of gold. His voice rose again, almost desperate. "Non-standard ammunition. That invalidates." A range officer inspected it, reported flatly, .338 Magnum, match grade within spec. General Hawkins lifted a hand. Proceed. And that was the end of it. She lay prone behind the rifle. The ground was hot beneath her. Through the scope, the desert shimmered, lines of heat twisting the world into fluid motion. Her breathing slowed. Heartbeat settled 70, then 60, then 59 beats per minute. In her periphery, people shifted, whispered, judged, but they were gone from her mind. There was only wind and distance. She felt the breeze across her cheek, measured its pulse, read its rhythm like the breath of a living thing. She didn't need instruments. Her body had learned the language years ago. Wind 14.3 miles per hour. Gusting to 15, direction northeast. Temperature 96 F, air pressure 30.12 inches. Humidity 18%. She adjusted elevation, adjusted drift, calculated bullet drop 819 feet, flight time 38 seconds. The physics came like muscle memory. The numbers spoke and she listened. His voice broke faintly behind her. This is insane. She exhaled halfway. In that breath lived years. The sandstorms of Afghanistan, the hiss of calms, the last words of, "We're compromised." Her finger found the trigger. She waited through one heartbeat, then another. On the third, she fired. The rifle thundered. Recoil slammed into her shoulder. The bullet left the barrel at 3,000 feet per second, spinning faster than a drill bit, cutting through layers of shifting air. To everyone else, the next 4 seconds were silence. To Alexis, they stretched into eternity. She could almost feel the bullet's journey, the drag of air, the tug of gravity, the invisible hand of wind nudging it off course, then the minute corrections of her calculations pulling it back. 3.8 seconds later, a faint metallic ping echoed across the range. At first, no one breathed. Then the spotter's voice cracked through the radio, shaky, unbelieving. Impact dead center. The sound that followed was chaos, shouts, gasps, disbelief. Soldiers ran toward the display screens as if proximity could make sense of it. On the monitor, the target appeared in high resolution. A single bullet hole, perfect center. Alexis didn't move. She flicked the safety, laid the rifle down gently, and removed her hearing protection. Only then did she rise. General Hawkins stared at the screen, then at her. "How?" he asked quietly, almost to himself. She met his eyes. "Physics, sir." Someone laughed, nervous, awed. Wind right to left, 14.3. Mirage distortion at 600 meters. Compensation left 1.8 meters down, 0.4. Standard ballistics. Lieutenant Hayes, one of the earlier shooters, shook his head. "There's nothing standard about that." Hawkins stepped closer. "Where did you learn to do that, Captain Reed?" She hesitated a moment, eyes steady. "Afghanistan," she said softly. "Operation Desert Phantom." The name hit him like memory. He blinked, saw the heat waves of another desert, another time. His team pinned down in Kandahar, seconds from annihilation, when the enemy had begun to fall one by one from impossible distance. Command had told him later the sniper was a classified asset, call sign Viper 1. He had never known her name. "You," he whispered, "you saved my team." She nodded once. The silence that followed was heavy, respectful, stunned. Then slowly, General Hawkins straightened. He brought his hand up in a crisp salute. "Welcome back, Viper 1." The crowd erupted, not with mockery now, but with applause that rolled across the desert like distant thunder. For a brief moment the air felt lighter, almost merciful. Stood apart from it all, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on her. The hatred there wasn't professional. It was personal, a wound to ego that went deeper than any bullet. He didn't join the applause. He turned and walked away. Alexis watched him go, something cold tightening in her chest. a shadow stirring that she hadn't felt in years. The past, it seemed, wasn't done with her. That night the base was alive with celebration. Technicians reviewed telemetry data. Analysts argued over how the shot was even possible. Officers congratulated each other as though they'd all pulled the trigger together. Alexis stayed away from the noise. She sat alone outside the barracks, the desert stretching endless before her. The stars were sharp tonight, uncaring, brilliant. She rolled Martinez's bullet between her fingers, the spent casing still warm from being cleaned. Perfection, she thought, is rarely luck. It's the sum of every failure that came before it. She remembered her team, their laughter in the dust, his voice in the headset, the last look on Rachel Morgan's face before everything went black. She whispered their names to the wind. Behind her, the mess hall doors opened. Colonel Blackwood approached, 2 mugs of real coffee in hand. He handed one to her without a word. For a while, they just sat in silence, listening to the desert hum. Finally, he said, "You know he's not taking this well." He nodded. Men like that don't lose gracefully. They turn embarrassment into purpose. She smiled faintly. "He'll get over it." "I'm not sure he will," Blackwood said. "And something tells me, Captain, your story with him isn't over." She looked out across the sand. "I'm not afraid of men like him anymore." He studied her face, the stillness there. "Maybe not, but be careful. Pride wounds deeper than bullets." He stood, leaving her alone again under the open sky. The desert wind shifted, brushing against her face like an old ghost. She closed her eyes. Sometimes silence was victory enough. But somewhere beyond that silence, she sensed it, movement beneath the surface, a story that hadn't finished speaking. Why did victory feel so heavy? 3 days had passed since the shot that silenced a desert. The base buzzed with it still, stories retold, distances exaggerated, physics bent by awe. 4,000 meters, the young recruits whispered, as if the number itself were holy. Captain Alexis Reed wished they would stop talking. She still walked to the logistics yard every morning at 600 hours, clipboard in hand, uniform neat. But wherever she went, conversations broke off mid-sentence. Eyes followed her now, not mocking, not cruel, just too aware. Respect, they called it. To her, it felt like exposure. At the mess hall, soldiers stood to let her pass. A few even saluted. One stammered a thank you for proving something about what women can do. She smiled politely but said nothing. Because what she had done hadn't been about gender. It hadn't even been about pride. It had been about ghosts, and the simple, unbearable need to make a single thing in the world perfect, if only once more. General Hawkins called her to his office on the 4th morning. He stood by the window when she entered, sunlight carving the lines of his uniform into sharp angles. "Captain Reed," he said, motioning for her to sit. On his desk lay a wooden box, unadorned, almost humble. Inside, resting on velvet, a single medal. "This isn't official," Hawkins said quietly. "Your record still lists you as logistics support, but I thought you should have it anyway." He pinned it to her chest himself. For service above and beyond, for lives saved in silence. The medal felt heavier than its weight. "Thank you, sir," she said. He nodded, then sat opposite her. "I've reviewed your full service file, the classified one." She stayed silent. 47 confirmed eliminations, Hawkins continued. 17 operations without friendly casualties, and then. The word hung like a shadow between them. "You were the only survivor," he said softly. Her jaw tightened. "Yes, sir." "Why transfer to logistics afterward?" She looked past him, toward the bright window. "Because I was tired of killing people, sir." The bluntness caught him off guard. Then he nodded slowly. "Understandable, but some skills don't fade, Captain, they wait." He opened a second folder and slid it across the desk. "Colonel Blackwood has been running an internal audit. Intelligence anomalies tied to Desert Phantom. She flipped through the pages, financial records, encrypted communications, names she recognized. One name stopped her cold. Captain Maxwell. Hawkins watched her expression harden. He was stationed at Airfield in 2014, intelligence liaison for special operations, including your team. Her voice lowered. You're saying he fed us false intel? We're saying, Hawkins replied carefully, that he had access to everything you received that day. And 3 days before your mission, $200,000 appeared in a private account connected to him. Another $200,000 3 days after. For a moment the office disappeared. She heard only the echo of his last words through static. We're compromised, and the gunfire that swallowed them. Her hands curled into fists. He sold us out, she whispered. The evidence suggests it, Hawkins said, but not proof yet, and proof is what we need. She looked up, meeting his eyes. Then give me authorization to find it. He studied her for a long time. The woman across from him no longer looked like a logistics officer. She looked like the sniper from the dossiers, the one they once called Viper 1. Consider yourself temporarily attached to internal security, he said finally. Report only to Colonel Blackwood and me. He leaned back, exhaling. And Captain, be careful, clever, and pride like his can turn lethal. That evening, Alexis found Colonel Blackwood waiting in the deserted mess hall, 2 cups of coffee already on the table. Thought you want the real stuff, he said, sliding one toward her. Sir, she began, the general told me about the investigation. He lifted a hand, and he told you about. Yes. Blackwood's eyes darkened. Martinez has been digging quietly. What he's found isn't just suspicious, it's disturbing. Deployment anomalies, teammates who disappear under training accident reports, missions derailed wherever served as liaison. Alexis's grip tightened on her cup, and no one saw it. People saw, they just didn't want to believe it. Before she could answer, the mess hall doors opened. Walked in. He moved with the ease of a man accustomed to ownership, smile too wide, eyes too bright. The faint smell of whiskey followed him. Well, he said loudly, if it isn't our miracle shooter and her new mentor. Blackwood's voice stayed even. Good evening, Captain. Ignored the greeting, pulled out a chair uninvited and sat. Quite the show the other day. One shot, one miracle. You must feel untouchable. Alexis kept her tone calm. Luck favors preparation, Captain. Luck, he repeated, smiling thinly. That's what they call it when someone gets lucky enough to fool the math. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. Tell me, could you make that shot again tomorrow, or would you crumble like the rest of us? Does it matter, she said quietly. The shot been made. Smile faltered. You talk like someone who's forgotten her place. Your logistics read, a warehouse clerk who got a lucky break. Enough, Blackwood warned. Didn't look away from her. You think that one bullet changes what you are. Alexis's eyes met his. No, Captain, it only revealed what you are. Something dangerous flashed behind his grin. He stood abruptly, leaning closer. Tell me, Reed, what did it feel like watching your team die in Kabul because someone fed them bad intel? The world narrowed to a heartbeat. For the briefest second, her mask slipped, the pain raw visible. Then it was gone. Her voice, when it came, was ice. You should be careful with stories you don't understand. Smirked, oh, I understand more than you think. He turned to Blackwood, saluted mockingly, and left. The silence that followed throbbed with unspoken things. That wasn't taunting, Blackwood said finally. That was a message. Alexis stared at the doorway where it had disappeared. Or a confession. She didn't sleep that night. By 200 hours, she sat at her desk again, the glow of her laptop painting her face pale. She dug through every database her clearance allowed, deployment rosters, intelligence logs, financial summaries. Records were a maze of transfers. Intelligence liaison, special operations advisor, temporary attachment, never long enough to raise suspicion, always close enough to sensitive data. Too clean, too deliberate. At 400 hours, she leaned back, rubbing her temples. The pattern was there, but incomplete, missing pieces buried under classification walls she couldn't breach. She needed higher clearance. She would have to ask Hawkins. But when dawn came, news traveled faster than sunlight. The general was gone, flown to Washington with Blackwood for an Eclipse project debrief, 48 hours minimum before their return. And in that gap, danger bloomed. By midday, Martinez appeared at her office door, face pale. "We need to talk," he said. Inside, he locked the door before speaking. "I found something. Communications logs from 2014. Authorized the transmission that sent your team into Kabul. Ignored two conflicting ground reports warning of enemy presence." Alexis's pulse quickened. Negligence. Martinez hesitated. $200,000 wired to a shell company 48 hours before. Another deposit after. Same pattern as the other missions. The air seemed to thin around her. "He sold us." Martinez nodded grimly. "I can't use this as official evidence. It was pulled through unofficial channels, but it's real." She stood, packing. "Then we take it to Hawkins when he returns." "There's more," Martinez said. "Last night accessed your personnel file using the general stolen credentials. He knows everything, your quarters, routines, even your family emergency contacts." She froze. "He's covering his tracks," Martinez continued, "and if he thinks you can expose him, he'll act first," she finished. He nodded. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, she said, "I'll handle it." "Captain Martinez," her voice turned steel, "I've hunted men like him before. The trick is to stay unpredictable." He looked at her and saw the ghost of Viper 1 returning. That evening she walked the base like a shadow. Every corridor felt sharper, every sound too precise. She noticed the same figure passing the end of the hallway 3 times in 15 minutes. Private Wilson. Sloppy tail work. She let him follow. Led him in circles until she vanished into a maintenance corridor and doubled back. Through the half-open door, she watched him stand confused, scanning for where she'd gone. "So he's watching me now," she thought. "Good. Let him think I don't notice." Back in her quarters, she opened her laptop again, this time using the limited Eclipse clearance Hawkins had granted after the shot. It unlocked deeper files, enough to confirm the pattern fully. Operation Desert Phantom, listed as verification officer. Time-stamped logs proved he'd held back critical intelligence until her team was already inside enemy range. Her hands trembled not from fear, but from fury so cold it felt like focus. She began copying everything, communication, wire transfers, satellite images, to a secured drive. At 2300 hours, alarms shattered the silence. Base-wide lockdown. She froze, listening to the automated voice echo through corridors. Security breach in weapons storage. All personnel report to quarters. Through the window, distant lights flashed. Sirens bled into the desert air. She grabbed her sidearm, heart pounding with grim certainty. "He's moving." Within minutes, reports came through internal comms. 2 guards unconscious near the armory, several weapons missing, communications center compromised. Then her secure phone buzzed. A single encrypted message from Blackwood, transmitted through Washington's relay. "Gone AWOL, evidence confirmed. Hawkins authorizes full measures, secure yourself." She read it twice, then looked out into the night. Beyond the perimeter, the desert stretched endless and dark, an old battlefield waiting. Her breathing slowed. The sniper's calm returned, unbidden but welcome. She holstered her weapon, pocketed the encrypted drive, and whispered to the empty room, "Your move." Outside, the sirens continued to wail, lonely cries swallowed by the wind. In the distance, a vehicle engine roared to life, faint but distinct. Somewhere in that darkness, the man who betrayed her team was running again. But this time, he wasn't the hunter. She was. How do you hunt the man who once stood beside you? The desert was silent now. The sirens had faded, leaving only the hum of wind over sand. Every few minutes, the lights from the main base swept the horizon, reaching but never finding. Captain Alexis Reed crouched behind a supply truck near the edge of the compound, her breathing measured. Through the open gate, faint tire tracks glowed under the moonlight, fresh, leading north. Escape route. He hadn't gone far. Men like him never ran without a plan. They circled back, covered their tracks, waited for the hunter to move first. She touched the holster at her side, feeling the worn grip of her pistol. The encrypted drive pressed cold against her chest pocket. Every instinct told her not to chase. Wait, assess, report. But instinct was what this was about anymore. This was personal. In the command center, chaos hummed through the radio bands. Colonel Blackwood's voice came through the static from Washington. "Reed, do not engage. Repeat, do not engage. We've dispatched pursuit units from Fort. Hold position and secure the evidence." She pressed the transmit button softly. "With respect, sir, you won't find him before dawn. He knows every blind spot in this terrain." "That's an order, Captain." She hesitated. "Copy that," she said finally. But when the channel went silent, she whispered to herself, "I never was good at waiting." She loaded a small pack, water, first aid, one extra mag, a thermal scope. No lights, no comms. Quiet was safer. Within minutes, she was past the outer fence and into open desert. The night air was cold and sharp, carrying the faint scent of fuel and dust. The moon carved the dunes into silver and shadow. Alexis moved low, following the tire tracks until they began to scatter into sand. Each print told a story. The vehicle had slowed twice, once to adjust direction, once to check if it was being followed. Was careful but not perfect. At a shallow ridge, she paused, crouching to study the sand. A broken shape caught the moonlight, small, metallic. A shell casing. She picked it up, .45 ACP, freshly fired. Her eyes scanned the ground. Footprints, two sets, heavy boots and someone else's smaller ones trailing behind. A guard, a hostage. She followed them. After half a mile, she found the guard lying near a rock outcropping, breathing shallow, pulse weak. The wound was clean, a single shot through the shoulder, not fatal. Signature, precise cruelty. The man stirred as she knelt beside him. "Captain Reed." "I'm here," she said softly. "Stay still." He took a comm unit, headed for the old radar station. She frowned. "That station's decommissioned." "Not to him," the guard rasped. "Said something about a pickup at dawn." Pickup? That meant extraction. Someone was coming for. She bandaged the wound quickly, left her canteen beside him and pressed his hand over it. "You'll live. Stay low until sunrise." Then she moved. The old radar station sat 15 kilometers north, swallowed by dunes decades ago. The army had abandoned it after funding cuts, leaving behind rusting towers and cracked cement. A perfect hiding place for a man who knew its layout. Alexis advanced with practiced precision. Low movement, stop, listen, move again. The world had narrowed to senses now. The crunch of sand under her knees, the whisper of wind through the steel skeletons ahead, the faint echo of something metallic striking stone. She froze. Someone was reloading inside. She eased closer, the barrel of her pistol leading the way. Through a broken window, she saw him. Sat near a portable terminal, the glow of its screen washing his face pale. He was calm, methodical, fingers moving over a keyboard. On the screen, encrypted files were uploading her files, the ones from her drive. Her throat tightened. He knew I'd come. Then, as if hearing her thought, his voice floated into the night. "You're predictable, Reed." Her muscles tensed. He didn't turn around. "I figured you'd disobey orders. You always did when the stakes got personal." "Put your hands where I can see them," she said quietly. He laughed, "Still giving orders, you sound like." She stepped through the broken doorway, gun steady. "Step away from the computer." Raised his hand slightly, still facing the monitor. "You know I liked him," he said softly. "Brave man, but naive. Thought the mission meant something." "Turn around," she repeated. He did, slowly. His eyes were calm, even amused. "You figured it out, didn't you? Cobble the false intel, the missing funds. You're good, I'll give you that." "Why?" she asked, the word cut sharper than her weapon. "Why sell us out?" He tilted his head. "Why does anyone do anything? Power, money, survival." Her finger tightened on the trigger. 17 people died. "And you lived," he said evenly. "Funny how that worked out." Her jaw clenched. He took a slow step forward. "You think you're clean. You pulled the trigger that day. You're just as much part of it as me." "Don't move," she warned. But he kept talking, voice low, hypnotic. "You killed those men because you trusted your orders, just like you trusted mine. The difference is I learned from it. You didn't." "Stop," she said, but the word faltered. Because deep inside, part of her believed him. Smiled faintly. "You're not here to arrest me, Reed. You're here because you need to know you were right, that you didn't waste your life following ghosts." "I'm here," she whispered, "to end what you started." For a second, the night held its breath. Then the distant rumble of an approaching engine broke the silence. Smile widened. "Looks like my ride's here." He moved faster than she expected, kicking over the table, sending sparks from the laptop as it crashed. Bullets screamed past her shoulder. She dove for cover, glass exploding behind her. He sprinted toward the north exit, firing as he went. Alexis rolled to her feet, fired twice, missed once, grazed him the second time. Blood marked his sleeve but didn't slow him. She chased him out into the open desert. The extraction vehicle roared toward them, a black SUV, headlights off, moving fast over the dunes. Waved one arm, signaling. Alexis fired again. The front tire blew, the vehicle swerved, rolled once and crashed in a plume of dust. Turned, rage twisting his face. He emptied his pistol toward her, each shot punctuating his scream. She kept advancing, controlled, deliberate, firing only when certain. Then silence. He was out of ammo. They stood 10 meters apart, breathing hard, moonlight painting their faces pale. "Still think you can win?" he spat. "This isn't about winning," she said. He sneered. "Then what is it, revenge?" She hesitated. "Closure." He laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "There's no closure, just survival. You should learn that by now." He lunged. The fight was brutal, close, desperate. Dust and blood and breath tangled. Was stronger, heavier, but she was faster, precise. Years of quiet discipline met brute anger. He slammed her against the wrecked SUV, tried to twist the pistol from her grip. She elbowed him, drove her knee into his ribs, broke free for a heartbeat. But he caught her again, forearm pressing against her throat. His face was inches from hers. "You think this makes you a hero. You're just a killer who couldn't quit." Her vision blurred, oxygen fatting, she forced a breath. "You're wrong." She drove the heel of her hand upward, into his jaw, into his throat. He stumbled back, coughing. She raised her pistol, hand steady. He looked at her and smiled. "You won't do it. You still believe in something." She did. Just not in mercy. The gunshot cracked through the night. Fell backward, eyes wide, the desert wind tearing his last breath away. For a long time she just stood there, gun shaking slightly in her grip, chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. The desert returned to silence. When she finally holstered the weapon, her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the unbearable weight of relief. Dawn found her still there. Helicopters swept low over the dunes as reinforcements arrived. Colonel Blackwood climbed out of one, his boots sinking into the sand as he approached. He stopped a few feet away, eyes tracing the wreckage, then's body. "Is it done?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "He won't hurt anyone else." Blackwood looked at her for a long time. Was it justice? She met his gaze. It was necessary. He nodded once, then "It's done." He handed her a sealed envelope. "From Hawkins. Direct orders, full debrief, then leave, effective immediately." "Leave?" "He says you've done enough, Captain." Her eyes drifted toward the sunrise. The sky was bleeding gold and red, the kind of beauty that comes only after long nights. "Maybe he's right," she said softly. Blackwood followed her gaze. "You know, some people spend their lives chasing glory, others spend theirs cleaning up after it." She gave a faint, weary smile, "and some just try to make peace with what's left." He nodded slowly. "You heading home?" "I'm not sure where that is anymore." She started walking toward the waiting helicopter. Halfway there she stopped, turned back. The wind caught her hair, carrying her voice over the sand. "Sir, tell Hawkins thank you for believing me." "I will," Blackwood said. She gave one last look at the horizon, the endless desert, glowing under morning light. Then she whispered, mostly to herself, "Sometimes closure isn't found in forgiveness. It's found in finally taking the shot." And she walked away, the sunrise reflecting off the metal still pinned to her chest, heavy, unshining, real. What happens when the war finally ends, but your mind doesn't know it? The helicopter blades faded into distance, leaving only the whisper of wind through the desert. For a long time after it lifted away, Alexis Reed didn't move. The sun was high now. The horizon shimmered gold. Somewhere beneath her boots lay the sand that had swallowed every version of her she'd ever been. Captain Alexis Reed, Viper 1, the quiet logistics officer, the woman who took the impossible shot. All of them were dead now. And yet she was still breathing. 3 weeks later she was home. If home could still be called that. Her small house sat on the edge of a quiet town in Colorado, pine trees instead of dunes, the whisper of wind instead of the hum of generators. The mailbox still bore her name, faded but legible. Inside, dust had settled like memory. She dropped her duffel bag by the door, stood for a long moment and just listened. Silence. Too much of it. The kind that presses against your thoughts until even breathing feels intrusive. She unpacked slowly, deliberately. One uniform, one medal, one old photograph, her and her team smiling in the cobbled dust, his hand on her shoulder, Rachel's eyes half hidden behind her scope. She set the photo on the mantel and turned away before her mind could finish the memory. That night sleep didn't come easy. It never did anymore. In the mornings she walked. Up the ridge, past the old water tower, down to the lake where the mist lingered over the surface like breath. Sometimes she saw fishermen, sometimes no one. But always her thoughts walked beside her step for step, shadow for shadow. Each sound brought flashbacks. A truck door slamming became a gunshot, wind through pine became radio static. Her body knew peace, her mind didn't. When people asked what she'd done over there, she said as little as possible. Logistics, she'd answer. Paperwork, nothing important. They smiled politely, satisfied, because no one really wanted the truth. The truth was complicated, bloody, heavy. The truth didn't fit in small talk. One morning, she stopped by the local diner. The bell above the door chimed softly. Familiar faces turned, not in recognition, but in curiosity. The town rarely got strangers. She sat at the counter, ordered coffee black. The waitress, mid-30s, kind eyes poured it and smiled. "Haven't seen you before, passing through." "Moved back," Alexis said. "Used to live here years ago." The woman nodded. "Welcome home, then." Home. The word didn't sting, but it didn't comfort either. It just existed like an echo. A few seats down, an older man was reading the local paper. Headlines about drought, about budget meetings, about things that mattered only to people who didn't know what war smelled like. And for a second, Alexis them, that quiet ignorance, the simple luxury of worrying about rain instead of blood. Then the waitress asked something unexpected. "You a veteran?" Alexis hesitated, then nodded. "Army," she said. The woman smiled softly. "My brother served too, Afghanistan." Alexis's chest tightened. "When?" 2014, didn't come back. The silence that followed felt heavier than the years between them. "I'm sorry," Alexis said quietly. The woman nodded, wiping her hands on a towel. "They said his unit got bad intel, walked into an ambush outside Kabul." Alexis's hand froze halfway to her coffee. Her pulse thudded once, sharp. "What was his name?" she asked. "Private Daniel Holt." She remembered. The name, the face, the way he joked about learning Pashto because it sounded like jazz. He had been one of hers. The waitress went on, voice distant. "They told us some sniper covered their retreat. That's the only reason 3 of them made it out. I like to think someone up there was watching over him." Alexis looked down, unable to speak. When she finally found her voice, it was barely a whisper. "Someone was." The woman smiled, not understanding. Then maybe he wasn't alone. Alexis swallowed hard, finished her coffee, and left cash on the counter. Outside, the morning light cut through the trees, sharp and golden. She stood there a long time, breathing it in. Maybe some ghosts weren't meant to be buried. Maybe they were meant to be carried, reminders of what dignity costs. Weeks passed. She tried normalcy, groceries, books, walks. But the quiet became its own battlefield. Without orders, without purpose, every hour stretched like an open wound. She found herself cleaning her old rifle, the one she wasn't supposed to have, not to use it, but to remember control. Each piece was muscle memory, each movement a ritual of order against chaos. When she finished, she'd stare at the metal and whisper, "You don't get to define me anymore." But part of her knew it wasn't true. One evening as dusk fell, a knock echoed through her house. 3 slow taps, then silence. She opened the door to find Colonel Blackwood standing there, out of uniform, coat dusted from travel. "Sir," she said, surprised, "what are you doing here?" "Retired now," he said with a faint smile. "You can drop the sir." She stepped aside, motioning him in. He looked around, nodding at the simplicity. Quiet place. Sometimes too quiet. He set a folder on her table. "General Hawkins asked me to find you. He wanted you to have this." Inside were documents, official closure of the Desert Phantom investigation. Classified annexes sealed, but one paragraph highlighted in pen. Operation compromised through internal betrayal. Subject: Captain Maxwell, confirmed traitor. Actions of Captain Alexis Reed directly prevented further loss of life. Commendation, pending presidential review. At the bottom, Hawkins had written a note by hand. "You brought truth where others brought silence. That's what leadership looks like." Alexis closed the folder slowly. "I didn't do it for commendation." "I know," Blackwood said softly. "That's why you deserve it." He looked around again, then back at her. "You planning on staying here?" "For now," she said, trying to remember what peace feels like. He smiled sadly. "You won't find it by looking for it. You find it by doing something that makes you useful again." "What do you suggest?" "There's a training facility in New Mexico," he said. They teach young recruits marksmanship and field ethics. They could use someone who understands both physics and restraint. She hesitated. You think they'd want someone like me? I think they need someone like you, he said simply. For a long time she said nothing, then she nodded. Maybe. He stood heading for the door. Take your time, the offer's open. At the doorway he paused. You know, used to say something before every mission. Perfection isn't hitting the target. It's becoming still enough that missing becomes impossible. She smiled faintly. I remember. Maybe it's time to teach that to someone else. He left quietly, his car headlights vanishing into the night. Alexis stood there, holding the folder, the words blurring softly in her vision. Maybe she wasn't done after all. That night she dreamed. She was back in Kabul, smoke, chaos, the weight of her rifle against her shoulder. But this time the horizon didn't burn. This time she wasn't alone. Her team stood beside her, whole, smiling. Looked at her and said, "It's done, Lex. You did what had to be done." When she woke, tears streaked her cheeks, but her heart was lighter. Not healed, but lighter. A month later she drove south. The desert looked different now, not as enemy but as memory. At the New Mexico training compound, a group of recruits stood on the range, rifles too heavy for their hands, eyes too eager for what they didn't yet understand. She introduced herself simply, Instructor Reed, former operations sniper. One of the recruits, barely 20, raised his hand. Ma'am, they say you once hit a target at 4,000 meters. Is that true? She paused, then smiled faintly. I did once, but the distance isn't what mattered. What did? The reason behind the shot. They looked puzzled, waiting for explanation. She didn't give one. Some lessons couldn't be spoken, only learned. All right, she said, let's begin. Days turned into weeks. The rhythm of instruction became its own kind of healing. Every correction she gave, every breath she taught, every quiet lesson about restraint, all of it rewrote the story she'd lived. One evening, as the sun set over the range, one of the trainees stayed behind. Ma'am, he said awkwardly, you talk about patience like it's everything. Did you ever lose it? She thought for a moment. Once, she said, and I spent years earning it back. He nodded, not understanding but respectful. Must been worth it. She looked at the horizon, orange fading into violet. It was. When the last recruit left, she stayed alone on the range. The wind was warm, carrying the scent of dust and gun oil. She lifted a training rifle, sighted down the scope at the distant target. Through the glass, the world narrowed to calm and breath. She didn't fire, she didn't need to. The silence was enough. Sometimes, victory isn't a bullet finding its mark. It's learning to lower the weapon and walk away. She smiled, whispering to herself, half prayer, half truth. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And for the first time in years, she felt the stillness that had always eluded her. Not the stillness of a sniper waiting to kill, but of a woman who had finally decided to live. Why did she see herself in him? The sun was brutal that morning, washing the New Mexico range in white light. The air shimmered with heat, carrying the familiar metallic tang of gun oil and sand. The recruits stood in formation, sweat tracing lines down their necks as Alexis Reed paced slowly down the row. Control, she said. That's the difference between marksmen and snipers. Anyone can pull a trigger, but not everyone can wait for the silence to tell them when. The recruits nodded, though half didn't understand. She saw it in their eyes, the hunger for glory, the illusion that war was courage measured in distance. Eyes up, she continued, pausing beside one of them, a tall, thin kid with restless hands. Private. He straightened, nervous. Walker, ma'am, Jonah Walker. Walker, she repeated. You've been adjusting your scope every 10 seconds. Why? He hesitated, trying to get it perfect, ma'am. Perfection, she said softly, isn't movement, it's stillness. He swallowed, embarrassed. She crouched beside his rifle, adjusting the knob just once, then looked through the scope. There, perfect. Now breathe. He followed her words, inhaling slowly, holding the air, but his hands trembled. Relax, she said. I am, he lied. No, you're fighting the rifle, she said quietly. Don't let it breathe with you. He tried again. The next shot landed clean, center mass. Better, she said. Now tell me why you flinched before you pulled the trigger. He blinked, caught off guard. I didn't realize I did. You did, she said, standing. And you will again. Everyone does when they're thinking about missing instead of aiming. Her voice softened. You're not fighting the target, Walker. You're fighting yourself. The other recruits watched her with quiet respect. To them, she wasn't just an instructor, she was myth. The woman who'd made the impossible shot. The one who spoke about killing as if it were math and morality braided together. But to Alexis, every lesson she taught was a confession disguised as wisdom. Later that day, she sat alone in the range office reviewing scores. Walker's accuracy was good, too good for a beginner, but his rhythm was inconsistent. On some shots, perfect precision. On others, wild deviations. She'd seen it before, the mind slipping away mid-trigger, haunted by something unseen. She closed the file, rubbed her temples. The air conditioner rattled in protest against the desert heat. Her reflection in the window looked older than she remembered, or maybe just quieter. Then came the knock. Come in. It was Walker. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, hat in hand. Ma'am, can I talk to you? She nodded. Sit. He didn't at first. It's about my evaluation. You're progressing fine, she said, but you lose focus under stress. Why? He hesitated, glancing at the floor. It's nothing. Walker, she said, voice steady. Out here, nothing gets people killed. He looked up then, eyes rimmed red. My brother died in Kandahar, 2014. Her chest tightened. The year echoed like a bell. I thought if I became what he was, Walker continued, I'd understand why. But every time I pull the trigger, I keep wondering if he hesitated. If maybe that's why he didn't make it. Alexis said nothing for a long moment. Then she stood, walked to the window, and stared out at the desert. When I was deployed, she said finally, I watched people die who didn't deserve to. Good people, smart people. I used to think hesitation was weakness, that every second you waited meant another name on the wall. She turned toward him. But now I think hesitation means you still have a conscience, and that's something worth keeping. He listened quietly, absorbing her words like a man starved for sense. Then she added softly, don't try to understand your brother by becoming him. Try by forgiving him for what he couldn't control. His throat worked. You sound like you knew him. She didn't answer. He stood, nodded, and left. When the door closed, she sat back down, her pulse thudding with old ghosts. Kandahar, 2014. Private Daniel Walker, Operation Desert Phantom. Her mind replayed the name on the casualty list. She'd read so many times she could still see it when she closed her eyes. The waitress's brother had been Holt. This one Walker. Two ghosts, same battlefield. And here she was, teaching their echoes. That night she stayed late on the range, the sky deep violet above her. She fired a few rounds herself, slow, steady, precise. Every shot was meditation now, not violence. She didn't aim at the target. She aimed through it into the space where sound met silence. When she lowered the rifle, she found Colonel Blackwood watching from the shadows. Still teaching yourself, he said. She smiled faintly. Always. He stepped closer, folding his arms. How's the program going? They're learning, she said, some faster than others. Walker, he guessed. She nodded. Good instincts, Blackwood said. But something's off with him. He's been pulling restricted data from the archives, claims he's researching his brother's unit. Alexis frowned. How restricted? Phantom level restricted. The name dropped like a stone between them. I locked him out, Blackwood said. But he's digging. You should talk to him before it becomes a problem. She nodded slowly. I will. The next morning, Walker wasn't at formation. The range sergeant said he'd signed out early, claiming personal leave, but the system showed no such request. Alexis's gut tightened. She went straight to the office computer, pulled logs, unauthorized access attempts overnight. Target file, Desert Phantom. She swore under her breath. By noon, she found his car abandoned on the access road outside base perimeter. Tracks led into the scrubland beyond. The desert again, always the desert. She grabbed her pack, checked her sidearm, and followed. The tracks led to an old observation ridge overlooking a dried riverbed. She spotted him from a distance, sitting on a rock, rifle beside him, laptop open on his knees. He didn't hear her approach. His eyes were locked on the screen, jaw clenched, shoulders rigid. "What are you looking for, Walker?" she asked softly. He flinched, spun around. "Ma'am, I." She walked closer, calm but firm. "You broke protocol, you know that." "I just wanted the truth," he said. "They lied about what happened to my brother, said it was bad intel, but the report doesn't add up. Someone sold them out." Her heart hammered once, sharp and cold. "What makes you think that?" "I found names," he said. "Redacted ones, but yours is, you were there." She froze. "You could tell me what really happened," he pressed. "Please." She looked at him, young, angry, desperate for closure. A mirror of herself years ago. "Walker," she said slowly, "some truths don't heal. They only bleed again." "I don't care," he said. "I just want to know who killed my brother." She stepped closer, voice quiet but firm. "You don't want that answer." He glared. "You think I can't handle it?" She shook her head. "I think once you know, you'll never sleep again." He stood, voice rising. "Tell me, damn it." The sound echoed off the rocks, startling birds from the scrub. She exhaled, eyes closing for a heartbeat. Then she spoke. "There was a traitor, someone who sold your unit's location. We found him years later. He's dead now." Walker stared at her. "Who?" "His name doesn't matter anymore." "It matters to me." She looked at him, really looked. It was. Recognition flashed across his face. The SEAL general, they named a building after him. "Not anymore," she said. He sank to the ground, hands trembling. "So it's true?" "Yes." He was silent for a long time. Then quietly, "You killed him, didn't you?" She didn't answer. He looked up at her, not in accusation but understanding. "Good." She shook her head. "No, it's not good, it's just finished." He stared out at the horizon, the heat shimmering between them. "Then what am I supposed to do with that?" "Live," she said simply, "because that's the one thing they didn't take from you." They walked back in silence. At the base gate he stopped. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have gone digging." She gave a faint, tired smile. "Curiosity isn't a crime, Walker, but obsession is. Don't become what I almost did." He nodded, eyes lowered. "Your brother was brave," she said softly. "Don't let his ghost make you forget to be alive." He swallowed hard, then saluted. "Yes, ma'am." As he walked away, Alexis looked out at the desert one last time. The sun was setting, light spilling across the sand like fire. And for the first time in years, she felt no weight pressing down, only quiet. Only peace. That night she sat by the window of her small quarters, coffee steaming in her hands. The desert wind rattled the shutters softly. She thought of the recruits, of Blackwood, of and Holt and Walker, the living and the dead, all bound by a single truth, that war doesn't end when the shooting stops. It just moves inward where no one can see it. She whispered to the empty room. "I used to think strength was about precision, about control, but maybe it's just learning when to stop aiming." Outside, the stars stretched endless above the desert, the same sky she'd once watched through a sniper scope, now infinite and forgiving. She closed her eyes and finally, truly rested. Why couldn't peace ever last? The morning was ordinary sunlight stretching through the blinds, the smell of black coffee curling into quiet air. Outside, the recruits were already on the range, their voices rising in laughter that carried over the wind. Captain Alexis Reed sat at her desk, grading performance reports, her pen gliding in neat, deliberate strokes. It felt good, the normalcy of it, the rhythm of work without danger. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps, official impatient. When she opened the door, 2 men in plain suits stood there. No insignia, no name tags, just the kind of posture that carried federal weight. Captain Reed, the taller one asked. Yes. He handed her a sealed envelope. By order of the Department of Defense, you're requested in Washington for an internal hearing, classified level 7. Her throat tightened. About what? He didn't answer. Transport leaves at 1900 hours. When she looked back up, they were already walking away. She stood there a moment longer, the letter heavy in her hand. It felt like the beginning of something, or the end of something else. That evening, the flight hummed through twilight skis, the desert fading below into shadow. Alexis sat near the window, her reflection ghosting across the glass. She had promised herself she'd never go back to D.C., to those sterile rooms filled with men who'd never heard gunfire outside a simulation. But promises, she'd learned, were fragile things. The man across the aisle recognized her. She saw it in the flicker of surprise, then the forced casual tone. "You're the sniper, aren't you?" he asked quietly. "The one from the test range." She didn't look at him. "I was a lot of things once." He smiled awkwardly. "They say that shot changed training protocols across 3 divisions." She nodded faintly, eyes still on the clouds. Funny how one bullet can change everything. Washington was colder than she remembered. A city of glass and shadows where power hummed just beneath the surface. They met her at the Pentagon gates, escorts silent, efficient. The hearing room was small, 4 people waiting at a long table. A general she didn't know, a woman from Defense Intelligence, a man from Justice, and Colonel Blackwood. Seeing him was a surprise. He gave a faint nod, but his eyes told her everything. "Be careful." "Captain Reed," the general began, "we appreciate your cooperation. This is an internal review, not disciplinary. We're reevaluating the case." Her pulse stilled. "Reevaluating?" "Yes. Recent documents from his encrypted archives have surfaced, contain communications with several high-ranking officials, including directives tied to Operation Desert Phantom." She met Blackwood's eyes, then back to the general. "You're saying he wasn't acting alone?" "We're saying," the general replied carefully, "that the operation's compromise may have roots higher than previously documented, and given your role in its termination, we need your testimony off record." Alexis leaned forward. "Off record? That means you're trying to bury this." The justice official cleared his throat. "We're trying to protect national security." Her voice sharpened. "National security doesn't cover murder." Blackwood watched silently, jaw tight. The defense woman spoke next. "Captain, you've been commended for bravery, for precision, for service beyond expectation. But there are things best left classified. The public doesn't need ghosts." Alexis stared at her. "Ghosts don't care about permission. They haunt anyway." The room fell silent. The general broke it finally. "Captain Reed, you killed a traitor. You ended a threat. But reopening this could destabilize careers, alliances, even funding channels that keep soldiers alive." Her tone turned cold. "So you're asking me to lie?" "To omit," he corrected. "There's a difference." Blackwood finally spoke. "Sir, with respect, if we bury this again, the truth dies with it, and so does any chance of reform." The general's eyes hardened. Reform isn't our concern, stability is. Alexis exhaled slowly. You want me to protect the institution that let exist. The defense woman's expression softened just barely. You've already done enough, Captain. Go home, forget this. She stood, the chair legs scraping the floor. That's the problem. I've spent years trying to forget. And she walked out. Blackwood caught up with her outside the building, his coat pulled tight against the wind. You shouldn't have walked out like that, he said quietly. They'll make you the problem now. Then they're out of problems, she replied. He sighed. They're scared, Lex. Files name people who still hold power. If this leaks, the fallout won't stop at the Pentagon. Good, she said flatly. Maybe it shouldn't. He looked at her, concern etched deep. You sure this isn't about vengeance? She paused. No, this is about truth, the kind that doesn't fit in a report. He nodded slowly. Then be careful. Truth's a dangerous thing when it stops serving the powerful. She smiled faintly. It's always been dangerous. They stood there a moment, watching traffic slide by in the dusk. The world looked so normal, people hurrying home, coffee cups in hand, unaware of the wars fought behind closed doors. She, them. Her hotel room overlooked the Potomac, a quiet view, deceptively calm. She spread the files Blackwood had given her across the desk. Encrypted data logs, meeting summaries, transcripts. One document caught her eye. Operation Eclipse, post-Phantom Intelligence Continuity. The dates overlapped with her unit's deployment. Names redacted except one. General Hawkins. Her stomach dropped. He'd believed in her, protected her, given her purpose when she had none. Could he have known? She read deeper, internal memos suggesting Hawkins had approved intelligence reroutes for classified coordination. No direct link to the betrayal, but enough ambiguity to damn him. She sat back, heart heavy. Truth was never clean. At midnight her phone buzzed, unknown number. She answered. A man's voice, older, roughened. Alexis. She froze. General Hawkins. It's me, he said quietly. I assume you've seen the files. Yes. Then you know they're incomplete. The people behind this want a scapegoat, and they're running out of bodies. Her pulse steadied. You're saying they'll come for me. I'm saying they already are. She moved to the window, scanning the street. A black sedan idled across from the hotel, headlights off. I can't protect you this time, Hawkins continued. They've turned this into politics now. The truth won't matter. Then why call, she asked. Because I needed you to hear this from me. Wasn't acting alone, but I wasn't part of it. I tried to expose it and they buried me under clearance codes. Why not tell me sooner? Because you'd have done exactly what you're doing now, he said. Chasing ghosts with a gun instead of peace. His voice softened. Don't become what they expect, Alexis. Don't let them make you a weapon again. The line clicked dead. She stood there in the darkness, city lights flickering against the glass, the weight of years pressing down. She'd spent her life chasing precision, believing every target had meaning. Now she wasn't sure what the target was anymore. The next morning, she woke to find the sedan gone, replaced by a discreet envelope slid under her door. Inside, a single flash drive and a note. For when you're ready to finish this, B. Blackwood. The drive contained files, private communications. They confirmed everything. Money transfers, names, signatures. The last document was a message draft never sent. Hawkins suspects, Reed might know, if she talks everything collapses. She stared at it for a long time. The ghosts were still speaking. That night she met Blackwood at the riverfront, where the city lights trembled across the water. You found the drive, he said. I did. He exhaled, then you know. I know the truth doesn't end with, she said quietly, and that the men trying to silence it still wear uniforms. He nodded. Then what will you do? I'll tell it, she said simply, all of it. That's suicide, he warned. They'll erase you before the story ever breaks. She looked at the river, its surface catching fragments of light. Maybe, but silence already erased enough of us. He studied her face, calm, resolute. You really haven't changed. She smiled faintly. I have. I just stopped pretending peace meant forgetting. He shook his head, half admiring, half afraid. You always were too brave for your own good. Or too tired to be scared, she said. Back in her room, she recorded the statement, voice steady, words deliberate. She spoke of desert phantom, of betrayal, of the lives lost, of corruption and the chain of silence that followed. She ended simply, I don't seek justice or fame. I seek memory because the truth dies when memory does, and I refuse to let them bury either. She encrypted the recording, attached it to Blackwood's files, and sent it to an anonymous military network. Then she turned off the lights, sat by the window and waited. Outside, sirens wailed faintly in the distance, maybe coincidence, maybe not. But for once she didn't care. If they came, they came. Some things were worth standing still for. In the reflection of the glass, her face looked calm, older, yes, but free in a way she hadn't been since the war. She whispered into the night. Sometimes truth is what saves us. It's what finally lets us stop running. And as the city lights pulsed across her face like slow heartbeats, Alexis Reed, soldier, sniper, survivor, finally allowed herself to exhale. How loud is silence when the truth finally speaks? It began with a whisper. An anonymous upload, timestamp 2:13 a.m. Eastern Time. A woman's voice, calm, unhurried, measured. A soldier's voice. Within hours, it had spread across encrypted networks. By morning, major outlets had it. By noon, the Pentagon did too. The files, the testimony, the truth. Operation Desert Phantom was no longer a rumor buried under clearance codes. It was a headline. And the voice behind it had a name. Captain Alexis Reed. By sunset, Washington was burning, not with flames but with questions. Committees formed, statements drafted, lawyers rehearsed their lines before cameras. Words like integrity and oversight filled the air, hollow from overuse. But behind every speech there was fear, the kind that trembles quietly beneath polished marble floors. The truth had done what bullets couldn't. It had made powerful men nervous. Blackwood called her from a secure line the next morning. His voice carried both pride and dread. They know it was you, he said. They're trying to decide whether to call you a hero or a criminal. She sat at her kitchen table, sunlight filtering through blinds, coffee steaming beside untouched toast. Maybe I'm both. They'll come after you, Lex. Even if they don't arrest you, they'll discredit you. She smiled faintly. Let them try. The story's already out. Truth doesn't need permission once it breathes. He hesitated. You sound calm. I am, she said, for the first time in years. That afternoon, she walked to the ridge behind the training compound. The desert stretched wide, endless, her old friend, her oldest enemy. Down below, the recruits practiced with focus that almost made her proud. Walker among them, steady now, eyes clear. He saw her watching, waved once. She lifted a hand in return, the smallest smile tracing her lips. Blackwood was right, they'd come for her eventually. Maybe tonight, maybe next week. But what they couldn't take anymore was the stillness she'd fought to earn. She whispered into the wind, let them come. By dusk, news anchors were already speculating. Who is Captain Alexis Reed? One said. Or a renegade? Another. Her face appeared on every network, that quiet stare, that calm defiance. They compared her to past heroes, past traitors. No one could decide which story to believe. And that was fine. Because for once, She didn't need to be understood. She just needed to be heard. At midnight, she drove to the old observation range, the same one where she'd trained the recruits. The stars were sharp above her, the air cool against her skin. She brought no rifle, no gear. Just her medal, the one Hawkins had pinned to her years ago. She placed it gently on the sand. "For them," she murmured, "for the ones who never came home." The wind lifted, scattering dust over the medal. She thought of Holt, of Walker's brother, names that had lived inside her for too long. "Rest easy," she whispered. "You were right, the world needed to know." She turned and walked away without looking back. The following week was chaos. Investigations, hearings, denials. General Hawkins was cleared of wrongdoing, the evidence had exonerated him. But the men above him weren't so lucky. 3 resignations, 2 arrests, 1 quiet disappearance. Blackwood retired for good this time. He sent her one last message before disappearing off-grid. "They'll write your story without you, Lex. Make sure you write your own first." She printed the message and pinned it to her wall. Then she began to write. The pages filled slowly over weeks, not with war stories, not with glory, but with truth. The smell of sand, the weight of stillness, the sound of a bullet cutting through both time and regret. She wrote of her team, of laughter before fear, of loss without bitterness, of how killing had once made her feel alive until it didn't, and of how silence, the kind she once feared, had become her redemption. Each page was an exhale she didn't know she'd been holding. When she was done, she didn't call it a memoir. She called it the distance between heartbeats. Because that's where all her wars had been fought, between one breath and the next. Months passed. The headlines faded, replaced by new scandals, new distractions. The world moved on as it always does. But the story lingered where it mattered most. In whispered conversations among soldiers, in quiet briefings about integrity, in training manuals rewritten under the guise of procedural reform. They would never thank her publicly. But they had learned. And that was enough. One autumn afternoon, she sat by the lake near her home, watching sunlight scatter across the water. Jonah Walker approached, now in full instructor uniform, her replacement at the training range. "Permission to sit, ma'am." She smiled. "You don't need permission anymore, Instructor Walker." He grinned awkwardly. "Feels weird saying that." "You earned it." He looked at the lake, thoughtful. "Heard they're teaching your curriculum now. Read method, wind calculation, patience under stress." She chuckled softly. "I never called it that." "You didn't have to," he said. "They did." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded clipping, an old article from a small military journal. The headline read, "Courage in Silence, the Legacy of Captain Alexis Reed." She read it quietly, eyes tracing the words like they were someone else's story. "They got most of it wrong," she said finally. Walker smiled. "Does it matter?" She thought for a long moment. "No, what matters is that they're still talking about it." As evening fell, they sat in silence, the kind that didn't hurt anymore. Walker finally asked, "Do you ever miss it?" "The field," she said, "the missions." "Yeah." She looked at the fading light. "Sometimes. But then I remember what it cost, and I realize peace doesn't feel like victory. It feels like being able to sit here and not need to explain anything." He nodded. "My brother would liked you." She smiled faintly. "He already did." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of pine and rain. "Go on," she said. "They'll need you early tomorrow." He stood, saluted, and left. When he was gone, Alexis leaned back, closing her eyes. The world was quiet, the war inside her finally still. Weeks later, a letter arrived. No return address, just her name in neat handwriting. Inside was a short note. "For those who stand between silence and truth, thank you, J.B." She smiled. Blackwood. Somewhere out there, he was watching the storm she'd started settle into something cleaner. She folded the note carefully and slipped it into her journal. Then she went for a walk. The path wound through trees turning gold in the autumn wind. She stopped at the ridge overlooking the valley, the same ridge she'd walked the first morning home. The air smelled of earth and rain, the kind of smell that says, "You're still here." For the first time she felt it fully, not the absence of pain but the presence of life. The breeze caught her hair, and she smiled softly. Maybe this was what peace looked like, not forgetting, but remembering without breaking. She closed her eyes, and the old ghost stirred one last time. His laugh, Rachel's grin, the weight of her rifle, the sound of that one perfect shot echoing through time. But now it didn't hurt. Now it sounded like forgiveness. That night she sat by her window, watching the stars scatter across the sky. A shooting star flared briefly, silent, precise, fleeting. She raised her coffee cup toward it in quiet salute. "To the ones who never missed," she whispered. Her voice barely carried, but the wind took it anyway. She leaned back, exhaled slowly, eyes drifting toward the horizon. And as the world fell into its soft, forgiving quiet, Alexis Reed, soldier, teacher, survivor, finally let go of the last piece of war still clinging to her heart. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.